Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Jeremy Slate. Jeremy is the founder of Create Your Own Life podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world, including the former CIA director, Super Bowl champions, and even a three-time Indianapolis 500 winner. He studied literature at Oxford University and is a former champion powerlifter turned new media entrepreneur. He specializes in using podcasting and new media to create trust and opinion leader status. In iTunes, he was ranked number 1 in business category and ranked number 78 in the top 100. Jeremy was the top podcast to listen to by Inc. magazine in 2019 and Millennial Influencer to follow in 2018 by BuzzFeed. He's also a contributing editor of New Theory magazine and Grit Daily. After a success in podcasting, Jeremy and his wife, Brielle, founded Command Your Brand to help visionary founders use the power of podcasts to change the world. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Jeremy. So thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Hey, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me today.
Fantastic. I look forward to this. Just so the listeners know, because you're going to hear episodes coming up here too. Jeremy was gentleman that I got to meet, who's one of the speakers at the 365 Driven Society event in Mexico back in May, and absolutely fell in love with this gentleman and his wife and his 2 darling daughters. It was an amazing event. I talk about it all the time. You guys still need to check out the 365 Driven Society if you truly want a family of people that are entrepreneurs that are always climbing and wanting to serve and help the planet, and do it in a very respectful, kind way. But bottom line, we are people that will not be pushed around. We're going to find out some of that information today when we talk to Jeremy. What I mean by that is we are very defined in what we believe. We're not harsh about it, but we stick to it. And that's exactly the type of people I have in my tribe. And I've been blessed to have Jeremy join that tribe and I be part of his. So let's get on with the show. Jeremy, one of the things that I focus on is a person's origin story. Mm-hmm. And people hear it all the time. Well, what's your back end story? What happened with you once you had high school? I want to know everything from the littlest Jeremy all the way to where we are today. I want to know your earliest recollections. And the reason for that is, in my experience, and especially in my finance business, this is my 20th year, people, the more vulnerable we are to them and share with them the things that we've gone through, the trials and tribulations as a child, makes it so that they know, like, and trust us more. And I've heard resoundingly from my listeners that they enjoy the fact that I focus on the first part quite a bit on the origin story, because then the rest of what we communicate with, they've already started to know, like, and trust you, and it means that much more to them. So if you could do me a favor and share with me your origin story and what the key things from your childhood, again, little Jeremy, to adulthood, that led you to where you're at currently.
Well, so for me, like, I'm somebody that I've always enjoyed learning. I've always enjoyed, like, history. And I was raised as an only child of 2, super blue collar parents. My dad didn't finish high school, mainly because he got himself in a lot of trouble. And he tried to play professional baseball and, got in the minors. And then from there, he had some injuries that kind of ended his baseball career. And he ended up working in the machine shop at a company, and he actually built his way up to one day being the VP of that company. So, like, hard work is something that's always mattered to me. I had my first job at 11, delivering newspapers. I did that until the time I was 19. My mom was somebody that she had a full ride to NYU for architecture. And her senior year of high school, her dad got cancer. Her mom really struggled with it. So she actually raised her brother, why her mom was having a lot of difficulties from it. So I come from a family of a lot of hard work, very small town. The town I grew up in is 5/8 of a mile in size. And I think that's a lot of what I've taken into every single thing that I've done. Like family really matters, hard work really matters. And that's always been something that's been there for me. On the weekend, I was working on farms on the weekend. I was, planting beans. I was picking beans. I was, planting tomatoes, picking tomatoes. Like those are I was doing hard work from a young age. I wasn't, um, you know, cutting hay like my dad was, but I was doing a lot of hard work on other people's farms on the weekend. And from there, I just went to started in public school, but I was one of those kids that was like really really smart, and because of that, like I didn't find the work challenging enough. So I'd finish it really quickly, and I'd be like a distraction to everybody else, like because I was done, so I didn't really care. And in second grade, they had a meeting with my parents, the school did. And they said, if he wants to stay here, you're going to have to medicate him. He's going to have to either do Ritalin or something like that. My parents were, my dad never, until I was in high school, never made like more than $40,000 a year. So they said, we can't afford it, but we're going to put him in private school because we're not going to, drug our kid and kind of take that ability out of him. So I ended up going to private school, but here's the thing, like when you don't start in private school, you don't fit in. And I ended up being picked on all through grammar school, which in high school made me the quiet kid because I just figured that was the way I could kind of get away from it, not have to deal with it. And interestingly enough, you think I would have been like, a super student, but I was really like a B plus student. I wasn't really, being the quiet kid. I was just like that, but I was always somebody that learned on my own, was very interested in things, reading a lot of books. Right now I'm reading a biography of George Washington. So it's like I'm always reading interesting things, and I've always done that from a young age. When I started reading Tom Clancy novels at like 10, so it's always been something that's been a big part of me, and I've always been interested in that. And I ended up going to Seton Hall University here in New Jersey, where I was an undergrad double major in Catholic theology and world religions, and I then studied literature at New College, Oxford, in the UK. Came back and then got my master's in early Roman Empire propaganda. I studied how the Roman Emperor convinced people he was God, and from there, like I came out into a really bad economy. It was 2011, and I ended up teaching at a high school after about a year of working as a house painter and a nighttime manager at a gym. I was working like 17 hours a day, just getting out of grad school. And about a year into that, I ended up teaching at a private school, which I was not prepared for. So I burnt out really, really quickly. And this was about 2012, 2013. In 2012, my mom had a stroke, and it made me look at a lot of the different things I was like doing in my life. And I'm like, well, shoot, man, like I'm miserable. I'm not happy doing this. Like, what am I going to do? So I went through a lot of different things, man. I quit my job on a whim. The principal thought I was crazy. I did network marketing. I did life insurance. I did in-home personal training. I did door-to-door sales. This is like in a 2-year period, by the way. I'm doing all these different things. And then I ended up private labeling and selling products on Amazon, but I kind of screwed that whole thing up and lost all of my inventory for no money. Actually, it was like in the negative. So I kind of quit being an entrepreneur and ended up working at a friend's marketing firm. And at that point in time, I'd been a podcast super fan since like 2009. I had a really great professor in grad school that I'm still friends with now, and introduced me to like the whole world of podcasts. And I started a podcast just as a hobby. We saw 10,000 listens in our first month. It led to us starting, the company I have now, which is Command Your Brand, that I run with my wife. Now in 2022, we have a team of 17, and we're just trying to do a great job for our clients, getting them placed on big podcasts.
Wow. There is so much similarities. I love listening to your origin. I wasn't an only child, but my first entrepreneurship, and I get asked this when I am a guest myself, was at 12 years of age. I started being a paper boy. At 11, I started helping a friend of mine, and by 12, I took over his route because he had had enough of it. And then I took over a couple more routes, and I was a paper boy for a lot of years. And people don't get Why is that? Because today's children can't even do that. Like in my
Well, it's an
country,
antique, man,
they don't allow it. They don't
yeah,
allow it in our country.
like I was the last newspaper carrier in the county I live in. Like they started getting rid of all the characters and make carriers and making them adult routes. And they're like, but this kid's really good. Let's just let him do it. When he's done, he's the last carrier. So I'm the last paper
Wow.
carrier in Sussex County, New Jersey. Yeah.
But it taught, like, I know for myself, and the reason I focus on this is people that are new or even those that are listening need to understand your entrepreneur journey can start at a really young age. For me, as a paper boy, I don't know about you, I had to, because there's an age difference, obviously, between you and I. Back when I did it, I had a little book. I had to go and I had to ring the doorbell and I had to collect money. I had to literally get physical money. Yeah. I had to give them a little tag. Yeah. And the biggest thing
it's interesting though, because some of the people, like, you start to learn their habits of how they'd avoid you because they didn't have the money.
I talk about that too. All of a sudden I'd be standing there
see
and
like the shades go down because they
see the curtain open up and they're peeking out the curtain and they close it. And I'm standing there smiling. And I learned a hard lesson being a paper boy. I don't know if you had this same experience. I was such a kind kid because my dad was a very successful entrepreneur, right? And he literally would, give him a chance, but he didn't realize how long I was giving him a chance. Sometimes it would be 3 months. I'd still deliver the paper, and I was doing it daily, delivering it 7 days a week. And literally they'd owe me whatever, let's say back then, $40 or $30. And eventually I'd cut them off. And I got, where's my paper? I'd be walking by and I wouldn't deliver it to them anymore. They'd be yelling at me, well, you haven't paid me. Oh, you owe me my pay. I got verbally accosted. I got physically threatened. I had it all. Like you said, looking through the curtains. You said looking through the blinds. It taught me some, that people can suck, right?
Yeah.
That it was a harsh reality.
But the thing I'll add to that too is like it also teaches you a few things too, because like you're collecting. A lot of times it's done separately from delivering, because when you collect,
absolutely,
but when you deliver, people aren't home. So you have to have like kind of the discipline to actually do that. But the thing that actually adds to even the discipline of going around and like collecting the money, like some of the driveways are long, and there's days that you're like, oh, I don't want to do that or whatever. And you look at it and you're like, well, shoot, I've missed this person for 2 pay cycles, and that was actually my fault. So there's also some of that involved as well.
Oh, responsibility. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Like when I got my paper out, my dad took me into the local bank where he dealt, and I had to get a checking account way back then because there was no electronic payment system. So I had to literally write checks. So I had to make sure that I collected enough because they'd give me a bill every 2 weeks. I had to learn how to write checks. My dad refused, says, you got to do that. This is your business. Track your numbers. And there was times where I didn't collect enough, yet I owed money. So a little bit of savings I had to tap into my savings. And that's life. But you're right. I learned, I don't want the listeners to think that I learned a lot. That's why I did it. I learned
well, I'll tell you, like we had these like these little cards, right? And these little things you tear off every time somebody paid, and then every half a year you'd have to get a new one.
Yeah.
And like, here's the weird thing. So like, I don't know why the newspaper I work for wouldn't accept personal checks. They just, from day one when I started, they wouldn't. So I'd have to do the whole thing, and then I'd have to go get a money order. So I'd have to like do the money orders to like pay for it every like 2 weeks. It was wild.
A money order. Yeah, no, I was blessed. I could give checks, but then, and just like New Jersey, you got the 4 seasons. So you and I were tenacious kids because I'd be going out and it would be blizzarding. I'd be wrapped up. I could barely see it, sleet, snow, rain, whatever. You got to get the paper out.
Dude, and those cold days are terrible because you can't like feel your hands halfway through the day.
Or we'd get different people, adults that would deliver the newspapers, like the big bundles at my house, a couple hundred newspapers.
They throw them and they slide and the bag cuts open and they get wet.
Or yes, thank you. Or it would be raining out and they could have easily, because I complained to the main paper, well, they have bags to put them in and tie it so they don't get wet. And I complained about the guy, and I stopped complaining because then all of a sudden I would get my papers 2-3 hours later. He started punishing me, and they couldn't, because we lived in a rural community.
Squeaky wheel.
We only 12,000 people. We lived in a small little community. Yeah, they couldn't find anybody to do it. So they basically said, suck it up. You're going to have to put up with the way he is. I said, okay. Well, when those clients complain that they got their paper late or they're getting a wet paper, I better not get penalized for it. So they started accommodating me for the fact that I had a jerk as a deliverer guy, right? It was horrible. But, so there's a lot of commonalities, and you talk about family really matters. Absolutely. And that's as you got to know me a little bit in Mexico, it matters to me too. That's why I automatically connect
You can see
well
I'm like
with
kind
families.
of
I connect with them.
obsessed with my girls. I think sometimes almost to a fault, but like, like my daughters are everything to me.
Dude, I'm obsessed with your family. I couldn't help seek you guys out because your energy, your warmth, your kindness is just, it's astounding, because there's a lot of families that aren't like that. Just because they have little kids doesn't mean that they're compassionate or kind. They can be cold and harsh. But yeah, you talked about, you didn't fit in school. I was similar, same thing. I got bullied, I got picked on. And when you brought up about the fact that the school wanted to medicate, I thought about my oldest daughter. My oldest daughter is probably, I don't know, around your age. She's maybe older. I'm not even sure. I can't remember your age, but she's going to be
I'm 35.
36. Yeah, my daughter's 36 as of this year. And she literally, going in school, was so smart but couldn't set the energy levels. So they convinced us, let's drug her, let's try Ritalin, let's try all these different things. And all it did was make her a shell of a person.
Yeah.
Right. And when we took
that's what I was saying about, like, with me, my parents saw that, like, we're not going to rob our child of what makes him great. You know what I mean? I think those drugs can do that to people.
Oh, absolutely. And it did. It affected her horribly. And then she got bullied and picked on because the kids knew that she was being medicated. How they knew? Maybe she slipped it, whatever. But, I went through that myself growing up, being bullied. And it actually made me, I used to resent my childhood. But when I look back, it taught me very valuable lessons. It taught me how to always be kind and always see the other side of the coin of what a person's going through, because people didn't do it to me. They just made assumptions about me, or maybe they weren't very popular and they became popular by making me the blunt of their anger or their, just their personalities.
But what's interesting about that too, though, Dwight? I was talking to our mutual friend Tony about this on Sunday, because we had a thing where we got together and everybody did a hike on Saturday, but it was just me and Tony on Sunday and everybody left. And like the weird thing about like getting bullied as a kid for me, though, it was like a real thing that messed with your head, though. And this is why, because the kid that bullied me was really good at making it look like I was doing it to him. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he'd bully me,
manipulate.
and I'd get punished for it.
That's how, what, I chuckle at that because it sounds like my
they'd be like, now Jeremy, we know you lie, so we're gonna listen to what he says. Like, you're kidding. You just saw what he was doing. You're like, no, you started it. I did. How?
Wow. Yeah, it reminds me of one of my sisters and I. She used to do that too. She'd come up and start stuff and I'd get blamed for it. Right. I'd retaliate, and I was the one that started it. And I was the only boy, right? Two older sisters. And my dad took it out on me. He blamed me for all of it. And I got physically punished over it back in those days. And yeah, so I get it. And the same sort of thing in school. I had not as severe as yours, but it took to a point where I had other students that actually cared for me. And we set a kid up that was doing that to me, blaming me for stuff that I wasn't even present. They'd say, oh, this happened. Who did it? And he'd go, Dwight did it. And he was a teacher's pet, right? Similar situation. So we set him up. He got caught, got suspended, right? For his behavior.
Wow.
Guess who never touched or bugged me again, even when he come back to school, because I set him up, right? So
no, I got suspended for bullying myself, apparently, several times.
Oh my gosh. That's just unbelievable. But yeah, it is.
But that's why I was so quiet in school, because I was like in high school, because it was like grammar school taught me that whether I do anything or not, I'm still getting in trouble for it. So what's the freaking point?
Well, and I have a big problem with the education system, and
don't even get me started.
I've lost so many listeners because of that
We're
my
homeschooling because I look at schools now and they're worse than when I was in school and they weren't great
they're
then.
they're a giant babysitting service, and I'm not against teachers. I have clients that are teachers. My sister's a teacher. Like, I get it. My cousin's a teacher. I love teachers. It doesn't mean that the political system that controls the education system isn't broken. They're just on a hamster wheel, teaching the same way as when I got taught, the same way, decades prior. And the pandemic taught me so much about the education system, in the sense that all my clients that are struggling to find people to watch their kids, because daycares were closed in our country.
Yep.
Didn't have anybody to watch their kids, couldn't send their kids to school. So all of a sudden now they couldn't go to work. And most homes today are two incomes. It's not the mom staying at home anymore, which is unfortunate, but somebody being at home for the kids is a good thing.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
So is mine. Absolutely. But in today's world, it's really hard because, with me being in finance, I do a lot of goal setting and budgeting, and I spend a lot of time, going between the 6 inches and peeling back the onion to help people with their lifestyle, and then directing it to finance. Most families I deal with could not survive a 1K income, based on the fact, not that they couldn't, I shouldn't say that they won't, because they're keeping up with the Joneses. They're keeping up to the media of what people say they should have: 2 cars, white picket fence, big house, and big vacations and that. And they're living a life that is a facade. And it's driving so many families apart, because with both parents working, what happens? Nobody's present. When they come home, they're still present at the job. Maybe something's still stuck for them, or they got to do laundry, they got to cook, they got to get the kids to bed, help them with homework, and there's no personal time. It's just go. It becomes a routine.
When you got to think, like,
I don't know about you, right?
I don't know about for you, like when your kids were younger, but I know, like, now, my girls go to bed at 7:30, and you got to figure, like, we work from home, but you got to figure, like, most people, when they're getting home from work, they're getting home at 6:30. So that means, like, maybe they have dinner with their family, like maybe they do something together and they don't see their kids, and their kids go to bed, so their kids don't know them.
Road rage too. Like, I hear clients say, well, it's hard for me to come home. I got a 45-minute or an hour drive, and I get people cut me off, and I get home and I'm all angry. And I coach them through different things that I've learned. I work out of my house too now. I have for 20 years, but I'll tell them, like, this is things that you can do to change your state. So when you're 10 minutes away from home, do this. It's not going to work every time, but your family deserves the best version of you, not the angry version that was created by your job, your business, or a driver cutting you off. We aren't taught that stuff. That's why the school system's broken, in my opinion. Not because they can't effectively teach math, they can't effectively teach personal development, how to deal with their people's emotions. If they're getting traumatized at home, how can they cope? Simple little things that they could do that haven't changed. And that's what I keep on rooting for. And I've tried in our school system in my country, and falls on deaf ears. And more of my clients homeschool.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I feel like we're also, like, I know we're in the US, so it's like the situation's like a little bit different. Like, I know, like I can't profess to know, like, how things are in Canada because I haven't lived there, right? So I don't have that reality that you have. But like one of the big issues we have here is, like, standardized testing is huge. Like, there's, like, these tests that everybody has to pass. You take them once a year, and the teachers unions kind of control a lot of different things. And, like, if the kids don't do well on these tests, and the teachers don't get raises, so it's like a lot of it is done for the wrong reasons, rather than, like, okay, like, what's the kid's aptitude? What can they produce? What can they do? What are they capable of? Like, we're looking at all the wrong indicators. You know what I mean?
Well, we do, because you know what? You just labeled Canada, because we're exactly the same. We do these
There you go.
they call them standardized tests.
As I said, I can't profess not to profess to know what I haven't lived through.
Dude, you don't have to profess. Like, that's Tony and I have a lot of long discussions, and Mike did too when I first met him a couple of years back. Well, can't believe it's already been a couple of years. Our country, and even David and I have talked about it, our countries are so similar. Like, literally, we are brothers and sisters separated by the 49th parallel. Our education systems are a lot alike. Finance is more alike than you'd realize, because I've spoken around the US at different finance events, and I know exactly, the differences and similarities. Am I an expert on the US education or finance business? No, but I do know we have a lot of similarities. But those standardized testings you talk about are so frustrating. They vary because our whole society's got to be right from a little young age, we are labeled. And
Mm-hmm.
those labels stick through us. Oh, that's a sickly kid, or that's a troubled kid, or oh, that's a hyper kid, or oh, that's a dumb. You know what I mean? It's just, it's exhausting. And then you
Mm-hmm.
go do those standardized testings, and you go to a parent. I don't know. That's one thing I don't know. I'm pretty sure you guys do parent teacher interviews where you
No,
sit,
no, we do them.
and
Yeah,
then they go over those reports, and guess what? The kid's sitting there usually, and they're
yeah.
hearing that negative, disparaging garbage. And they might have 3, 4 kids in there and other teachers doing it, because I've had that environment. And they'll hear little Johnny or Sally sitting close by getting praised, and they're getting said that they're not the greatest. And then
Mm-hmm.
that instills and it locks in their subconscious, and it keeps on building and building and building. And, Symmetry lady I interviewed a couple of days ago, Nancy talked about she's a shadow coach, teaches people about how to get out of their shadows of what their programming and stuff from their childhood to adulthood has caused for them. And some of the things her and I talked about are just like, man, it doesn't matter what you call it, but we get labeled.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And as
And
I said, like for me, like I ended up they're like, wow, he's really smart. He finishes all his work early. And now he's really bored and he's like throwing pencils at us and stuff like that because he's like, why is everybody else taking so long? And so they put me in a program they called like Talented and Gifted. They're like, oh, I put him in the Talented and Gifted program. My parents were like, wow, that sounds great. Like, I'm glad you're doing this. And what that meant was like if everybody had to write a 1-paragraph essay, I'd have to write a 1-page essay. It wasn't a more challenging essay. It wasn't more things I had to cover. Just everything was just longer. So being a smart kid, I caught on to this pretty quickly, and I was like, so I'm just not going to do it. And that was kind of when that meeting happened of, okay, like Drug Armory's got to go. Cause I was kind of like, I don't want to sound like a cocky, but I think at this young age, I was kind of too smart for him.
you know what? It's not even cocky. We get mislabeled in life as cocky. I've heard that about kids and adults. Confidence is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You're confident already in who you are, right? And that's commendable. But yeah, I love talking with you about your origin. One of the things I also enjoyed, you tried out MLMs. I've been in a number of network marketing companies, and I'm not here to cut them down. They started me on the path back in the early 90s on
Yeah.
personal
Best
development.
boot camp to
Personal,
business I ever
yes,
had.
personal development. But I don't like having to recruit, which most of them are, recruiting your friends and
Yeah.
family to buy overpriced products and services normally, so that I can make a little fraction and all the people I've taught make all the money. And that's why they're borderline pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you look up the
It's not, they're
definition
not
of,
even really
right?
borderline. A lot of them are.
Yeah, the governments just don't close them down because they make money off of it. But and I smiled when you said you were an Amazon like you did Amazon. I did that. I had a store for a couple of years, and
I actually went
I
to
got screwed
China and
over.
learned about manufacturing.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I got screwed over by Amazon. I brought on a business partner. I had a coach for it. I spent like initially getting into it about 25, 30 grand just setting it up for doing arbitrage through eBay and doing Amazon, becoming, doing the fulfillment by Amazon and all that stuff. And had stuff posting. We were doing good. And then Amazon, this is already 7, 8 years ago, they started selling stuff behind, meaning all of a sudden the same thing that I was selling, they were selling, and they were undercutting me. They were constantly doing that. I reached out to them. I complained, had a call with them, and they said, oh, well, we're allowed to do that. This is our business. Yeah, but you guys rely on us to bring product to you to sell, and you're turning around and I'm selling it for $29.95. And then it's going well for a few weeks. You notice it. All of a sudden now you're selling it for $24.95 or $19.95. Like, honestly, I can't survive like this. And then you're charging me all these, people that are listening, they charge you to have your stuff sitting on their shelf. They ship
Yep.
it out, they charge you. It gets returned, you get charged. All of a sudden, the little bit of spread you make is gone. And I just
Yeah.
one day up and closed it down in 2017 and said, I've had enough of this, right? You guys suck. Do I utilize Amazon? Absolutely. I don't have much
Yeah.
choice. There's certain things you can't get from anybody else, but I like that. We have a lot of commonalities. So,
Well, what's interesting about that one, Dwight, is like
you know,
one of the strategies people teach you, like when you start an Amazon business, is like you want to get like initial traffic to like kind of like fake, trick the algorithm, I think, in a lot of ways.
yeah.
So like one of the ways you do that is like, you give away $1 product to select people to like kind of like, oh, big, there's a boom. Okay, cool, we'll buy more. It kind of replenishes it. But like when you create that promo, one of the things Amazon does is there's like a checkbox that says like put this promo code on the listing. And when you create a promo code, it usually automatically checks the box. So you have to remember to uncheck it when you create it. So for me, like I created this $1 promo code and it went on my listing. So some bright person in Maryland saw this and bought every single unit I had till I was out of business about 25 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They
Human error, man.
well, human error, but I get that because there's quite a few things that I do in my finance industry. I have to be really careful with the online systems, and even before it was online, we'd download software that would automatically default things. And if you looked at it, right, and went down to it on a microscopic level, it was dealt to make them more money at my mistake, meaning, human error, like you said, something that shouldn't be that way. They'd implement and I'd complain about stuff and it would cost me, but it all never ever cost them. Right. It just, but anyway, we'll go on from there. So, Jeremy, your podcast, Create Your Own Life, studies the highest performers in the world. What was the driver behind you deciding to have a podcast about the world's elite performers?
But that's the interesting thing, because I feel like it developed over time, right? Like it wasn't where, like when I started, it was this idea of like, I was learning about internet marketing. I was doing all these different things. So like a lot of the initial stuff was, I was talking to people in the network marketing world. I was talking to people in the internet marketing world. And it kind of developed over time, if that makes sense. Like I kind of was like, I guess, what do I enjoy the most? Well, I enjoy elite performers. And I'm like, well, I'm not an elite performer yet, but I'd like to learn how to be. And for me, that was just kind of my own curiosity to learn that. And the more of those I did, the more interested in that I became. And here's the funny thing about this, because this was 2015 when I started it. Kind of the more of those conversations I had, the more I became like that myself, if that makes sense. And that was I had my book came out on the 21st, which is called Unremarkable to Extraordinary. And it's interesting because like a lot of the conversations I had, I didn't think that way, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I do now because I've had life experience and all these interviews and everything else. And I in some ways, like I've got a long way to go to be like some of those people. In other ways, like I've become more like them than where I started. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. You're a work in progress, just like myself and everybody else. And hopefully this gives a lot of people that are listening or watching this hope that at the end of the day, you never want to stop learning. And once you think you arrive, you're dead. You really are. You literally,
100%.
like you talk to people that know people that are multimillionaires that have lost it all. If you look at the root of it, most of it's because they think they've arrived. Their ego is taken over. Like an ego can be a good thing too, but their bad part of their ego takes over. They get complacent, they stop learning, they stop climbing. And like you said, years before, you didn't even know any of this stuff, but you were tenacious, you wanted to learn. And as you said, you hoped to be that person. But you didn't just hope, you took action.
Yeah.
Right. And
I think that's a huge problem too, because there's this whole idea of like I hate with a passion the phrase follow your passion. Like I hate the idea of following your passion, because that means you're chasing something, right? It means you're trying to catch it, and like, if your passion would just stop moving, you could sneak up on it and grab it by the ears. But like, to me, I like saying find your passion, because finding your passion, it's an active process as opposed to a passive process. Because in finding your passion, that implies you kind of did some things you weren't passionate about, and either you found out you weren't passionate about them or you found out you were because you did them. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, the thing that really spawned this for me is I read a book a number of years ago by Cal Newport called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And he says that like people have it all backwards and they're looking at passion. They want the passion to come before they do something, right? Like, okay, I am passionate about, podcasting. Okay, let me start a podcast. But here's the thing, like until you do something, until you've experienced it, until you've worked at it, until you've bled for it, until you've, put in the time, you may not be passionate up front, right? And like passion a lot of times isn't the thing to pull you through. But you can do something, become really good at it, become one of the best at it, and you'll find you're pretty passionate about it, man. Like, and I think that's the right viewpoint to have on that.
Oh, absolutely. I look at the fact of, as you mentioned, you know, find your passion versus chase your passion. And bottom line, you mentioned podcasting. I've been on people's shows that have never been a guest on a podcast. And I
Mm-hmm.
had somebody tell me a long time ago, again, Tony, our mutual friend Tony, invited me to an event, and that's where I met some of the people I've met, and they're lifelong friends now. And they talked, it was a guesting weekend. Really, we went on there. Tony was one of the hosts of, we had multiple podcasts on there. You paid a fee to spend time on this event, and then you literally you were a guest on a podcast, right? Tony
Mm-hmm.
had a bunch of people. I was on a bunch of people's podcasts. That was my first experience guesting, because at the end of the day, we talked about this as well outside of this call about coaching, about how many posers, how many people coach but have never experienced or done. It's the same in the
Mm-hmm.
podcasting world. How do you drive yourself a passion to know if you're going to have a passion for podcasting if you don't become a guest on something, right? Where you actually you're going to understand what you're going to put your guests through, right? In my opinion, you should be a guest on some podcasts. And number one, and you're going to find out if you actually are interesting or not too, because
Well,
just
even
because you're
even
successful doesn't mean you're interesting.
well, even from that perspective, though, this is going to sound funny, but it makes sense when you get it. Like to be a good host, it makes sense to have been a guest first. And the reason I say that is because you can actually put yourself in the shoes of the person you're talking to. So
Absolutely.
because of that, I can think of, oh, well, I remember when somebody asked me that, or I remember when somebody asked me a question like that, like I didn't know how to handle it, or I didn't know how to respond. So like it makes you a better host because you've had kind of the other experience, and you've worn the shoes of the other person.
Yeah. And honestly, anybody out there on the planet, when you want to do something, go and try it out. Go check it out. I look at all this can even be directed to people that go to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at statistics in our country, and I actually checked it out in the US, 65 to 70% of people that go to university or college and graduate with a diploma or a degree don't even do it after the fact, because they realize they really didn't want to. And a lot of times they realize it by their second year, if it's a 4-year program, or first year, if it's a 2-year program, whatever, but they don't want to quit because they don't want to disappoint others. Don't
Well,
disappoint yourself. Move
but
on. Quit.
it's not even that
Right?
too. Like that's definitely important, right? Like you don't like we make decisions because we don't want to disappoint people. We make decisions of like, like society wants this for me, my parents want this for me, whatever it is. But like at the same time, like I think there's also this lie that's been perpetuated. And like I know my parents did it with me, not intentionally. It's because thought they were helping me, right? Like everybody thinks college is kind of that thing to get you through. And I think for a lot of careers, you don't need it, right? There's some careers where, I don't want somebody operating on me that hasn't went to medical school or college or whatever. That's kind of dangerous. But like there's
Absolutely.
a lot of careers where you don't need it. And we've been taught that it's like this golden ticket. And so because of that, I think kids come out with kind of this mentality of, I deserve this because I went to school for this and I spent all this time working at this. So like, I should make more money because I went to college. And it's like, well, in actuality, you may get some knowledge, but one of the big things missing is application. You know what I mean? Like the ability to do and apply knowledge and work at it and understand it. And frankly, that's why I like hiring kids that are right out of college, because they don't have applications, so they can learn how to do it my way. But like at the same time, like that lack of application is I think doing them a big disservice, because they have an idea of when they come out, they're going to make a lot more money than they are, but they don't have the skills to do it. So like to me, Dwight, one of the big things missing is, and I think the trades has done a good job at this, because in order to like work in certain trades, you still have to be an apprentice, right? If you want to be a plumber, you got to work under a plumber for a while.
Yeah.
Come in as a junior plumber, become a master plumber, all these different things. But like, I think a lot of careers, there should be because you look at high school. First of all, I think high school is just too long, right? Like I think the important stuff could be covered in 2 years rather than 4 years. And then
Agreed.
I think what you should be doing is there should be some sort of an apprenticeship period where maybe for 6 months you work in one career and you get paid a little bit, but you do it while you're figuring things out. Another 6 months you work in a different career. And what this does is this allows you to get some experience, right? Like you figure out if you like something, you can kind of continue down that path. But it also works as a discernment because you say, you know what I mean? Like when people think of the seminary and somebody going to school to be a priest, they think somebody goes to school to be a priest. But one of the big reasons to go to seminary is to discern, right? Oh gosh, this isn't for me. And I think an apprenticeship could really work the same way if it was kind of a shorter high school period between high school and college. And you say, okay, based on the career I want, based on the experience I want, it looks like I need some college. Or you know what? Based on the career I want, based on the experience I have, I can go to this trade school, or I can work for this person, I can do whatever it is. I think we need more apprenticeships and on the job experience.
Discernment is important. Like in our country, I had a choice. Like I went through electronic engineering. I could do it through university, spend 4 years where 90% of it's book taught, come out and absolutely have no hands-on experience. I decided to go to a technical college here where that 4 years is done in 2 years. And it's about 50-50, hands-on labs, doing this, doing that. Started with 185 people. I was one of 18 that graduated 2 years later, right?
That's
Because
impressive.
it's an intensive program. The math that I had to learn, the different levels of thinking, thought process, and they cram it all into 2 years, but there's practical. So I'm actually was in the lab. I was working with circuit boards. I was actually taking designs that I had created on CAD, and we were creating these products. And then we'd have the theory, we'd have the practical. I have friends that went to university to take the 4-year program. When I graduated, I was sought after and hot commodity compared to them because I was actually taught critical thinking along the way and critical application.
Yep.
And yet they looked down on us because they had a degree. I had a diploma in electronics engineering. Difference is though, throughout the years, and when I owned a computer company and a service company for many years, I was employing people that were those people, and I had to spend more energy on them, teaching them, even fresh out of school. Then I stopped hiring them. I hired only people that came out of my where I went to college because they were more practical. They were they were worth their money, right? And no disrespect to people that go to university, but like you said, there's certain things that you should be discerned and said, there should be discernment and said, hey, you want to do this? Okay, you're done 2 years of high school. I like your idea. Now let's go into, you're going to, you want to be a doctor? Okay, you got to take all these kind of courses, not teach a generalized overview, a blanket that everybody has to take, right? How many times have you had to calculate the circumference of a circle since you graduated?
You'd
Right?
be surprised. I build a lot of stuff.
Okay,
but
sorry.
But here's the thing too, because like I'm weird with construction projects. I enjoy them. It's like really, I like things that let me work with my hands because
bad example.
No, it's sometimes you run into like a computer problem or something like that, and you're like, okay, I can't handle this right now, but if I go do that, I know I'll be able to think better when I come back to this. But here's the thing too, is like, how many students go through 4 years, 5 years, 6 years of university? They get out, they have student loans that they now can't pay for, and they get done and they're like, oh my God, I don't want to work in this career. And now, oh my gosh, I have to make more money than my parents made because I can't pay off these loans. Like it's a weird situation to be in.
I know my daughter is a prime example. She graduated nursing in January of 2020 and got thrown into a COVID unit at one of the busiest hospitals in our province in Calgary. And literally, getting to that point, she gets tossed into a very precarious situation, not even get your feet wet, watching people die left, right, and center, having to listen and deal with all the propaganda around it. But the key point here is she was just about $80,000 in student loan debt when she graduated. And it wasn't that I wasn't helping her, because I did help her. She chose to leave where I live, right? 3 hours difference. So now all of a sudden she's got to pay for an apartment. She's got more expenses and costs that she could have avoided living at home. but that student loan debt still haunts her. So only a couple of years later, but her whole goal now, she's become a travel nurse, and she's actually looking to travel down into the US eventually too and work down into the US, is to pay off her student loan. Well, when you
Mm.
graduate from something, you want to spend the next 4, 6, 8, 10 years being stressed about that student loan. You're not productive in your mindset. It's always
Hmm.
haunting you, that debt load. And so, yeah, we need to be more effective at helping people figure out what they want to do. And I'm not saying give them free schooling,
No.
but teach them effectively how they can manage and do it. Like I have another friend of mine, they went to the same thing, and they took, instead of finishing it in 4 years, they took 6, because they split everything up in their program they wanted to do as a teacher so that
Hmm.
they would come out of school debt free. How about we
Well, and
encourage
there's
that? Why put a label of 4 years? Make it 6 years so that they can still work part-time and effectively not get in debt.
Well, and there's even like a couple other things you could do with this too. Like I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the US, the government added a stipulation to all student loans that they're the only loans that cannot be removed by bankruptcy. So even if you declare bankruptcy, you still owe that student loan. That's how it is in the US. But I think
Same with
one of the
us.
things, yeah, same with you. Oh, those banks are good, man. They'll protect themselves.
Tax bills too. If you owe the
Yeah.
government tax money, bankruptcy doesn't absolve you of it.
Yeah. But like one of the things I think that would be interesting and could be creative, is there's a couple different ways you could do this. Like, if you wanted to get the private sector involved, there's one way you could do it. If you just wanted to keep it as kind of a, another way of doing it. But like, let's say one way you could do it is like, let's say you put 15% of the money for college down up front, and then they make, I don't know what percentage, like let's say maybe 15% of your income for your first 5 years out of college. Well, they're going to want you to get a better job. Like, I think that's going to really matter. Or you could do it another way where you could get businesses involved, right? You pay your percentage up front, and then that business comes in and they pay the rest of your tuition because, you take a reduced salary for your first 5 years out of school or whatever. But something where you could kind of
An
make it so you're
incentive.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, where you're not putting as much money out of your own pocket, but there's also an incentive for those schools to make sure you're capable of doing something when you leave.
Yeah. And it's crazy. Like even my daughter, the amount of, to get into nursing school here, depending on which university you go to, you have to have a 90 average too.
Yeah.
Right. And like she said, Dad, she says, it doesn't make me any better of a nurse than my friends that were not great performers in high school that had 70s and 80s. I was an honor student, but it didn't mean I was smarter than them. I knew how to apply myself better. I knew how to be more, you know, disciplined or whatever the case may be. Because her and I've had the discussion, and it was a real struggle. She ended up having to have the school university she went to 92.5.
Wow.
Yeah, and they made her take a few courses because she only had a 90 average, and they give her one semester. She had to these courses and had to have a 92.5 minimum,
Mm.
and then they accepted her.
Wow.
Couldn't get into university with a 90 average. High school, all the way through high school honors, right? Smart kid, very disciplined. And then come out, and then you have all these student loans and all that burden. And, anyway, we could go on and on about this, but I
No,
like your
I
idea.
feel you.
Yeah. So,
This is one of my major like things I'm usually complaining about and trying to find a solution to. So you kind of hit the nail on the head pretty quickly in this conversation, man.
well, you look at the difference between you and I is I'm just farther in the journey. Yeah. You've got two young girls, beautiful family, beautiful wife. You're a fantastic individual, and you're going through your journey in life, some of the things that I've already experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see enough change. So, like you and I, there's not quite 20 years difference in our age, but there's so much commonality between you and I.
Yeah.
Difference is you're in part of the journey that I've already experienced, and I'm still not seeing change. And you're still having to
Mm-hmm.
go through that journey that I wished, 20 years that's passed, and it has changed. Our world isn't necessarily evolving in the greatest
Mm-hmm.
ways, right? It's
Yeah.
always about control. It's always about making little automatons so that the wealthy continue to thrive. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but the middle class and poor don't seem to evolve. They're just stuck on that hamster wheel that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So Jeremy, you are a former champion powerlifter, which requires extensive training, focus, and stamina, and lastly, a tenacious nature to never quit. How has this been part of your life? How, pardon me, has this part of your life helped you build your media business?
So that's interesting. So, why did I start weightlifting? Well, number one, because I was a wrestler in school. But number two, like when I started working out, I didn't have to act any different. People just left me alone. And, as I mentioned, like, that was kind of a good thing. And also, like, it gave me a lot of confidence. So I started communicating better. I started approaching people differently. So just for me personally, it was a big personal development thing for me, actually. And it helped that I found out I was kind of genetically predisposed to, have the physical attributes to be good at it. You know what I mean? Like I've never put anything in my body that shouldn't be there, right? I've never done any like synthetic substances or anything like that, like, steroids or any one of those things. I've just genetically been in pretty good shape. So it kind of worked out for me that way. But it taught me, number one, how to be a better competitor, because I was a good wrestler. I wasn't a great wrestler. But it taught me competition in something that I physically could excel at, to the point of, I don't want to say the cockiness, but I think sometimes there was a little bit of that, because I knew I could pick up just about anything. So I'd show off sometimes. But at the same time, that's a confidence you need to be able to approach something and be able to think, okay, yeah, sure, I could fail at this. Did I fail at some lifts I tried? Absolutely. Do I still fail at some lifts I tried? Absolutely. But it pushes you to try some things that, you may fail at, but you have the confidence thinking you can kind of do it. And when you can approach that in business, like, you're going to try a lot of things that aren't going to work out. So to me, it helped me to mentally be the person I needed to be to build the company I built. But I wasn't that person until I started working out, until I started competing.
Yeah, that's great, great response, because that's what I believe in myself. I know myself, in my 50s now, I have debilitating spine disease that continually gets worse. So I had to give up doing serious workouts, but I used to do CrossFit all the time. I used to have a trainer as a friend of mine, good friend now, and also a client that owns CrossFit gyms in Edmonton here, where I come from. And it created a discipline. Like you said, maybe you can't do something, but you're going to try again. You're not going to get
Yeah.
defeated. It helps push out that defeatist attitude that is instilled from us by society, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Like, here's the funny thing about it is, like, I don't know, like you kind of get like a sly smile and a little bit of enjoyment with it. You're like, see that army tank over there? Watch me pull this shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's
yeah,
some stuff like that. So like
that's awesome.
that confidence can carry you through a lot of things, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think when I look at my kids, like, I think that's something that's awesome about my kids, right? When you look at kids when they're really young, they haven't been beaten down yet. They haven't, lived through some of the difficulties of life. So they think they can do anything. And it's awesome. And that's why, like, as parents, like, even when they, they fall down or something happens, we're quiet for a few seconds. We make sure they're okay and they're physically, like, not hurt, but we don't, oh, poor baby, are you okay? Because you know what? People internalize that, and you're telling people not to take risks. So, like, I think the more we can get back to being like we were as kids, I think kind of the more we can succeed at things.
Oh, 100%. And great way to put it. That spark, that energy, that risk taking. Because I remember Tony and I talked about it, and when he was on my podcast, he was my first interview guest. We talked about him being with a skateboard and how the risks he'd take and other kids
Yeah.
wouldn't, and how that really, his origin fits into who he is today. Right?
Yeah.
It's just it's amazing. But you're right. We need to quit going, oh, poor little Johnny, Sally, your little boo-boo, like, you don't necessarily
Exactly.
need to be a jerk and say, hey, toughen up. You can just say, oh, that's
No,
too
no,
bad.
no.
That's too bad.
We
Let's
just,
bandage it and let's try again.
yeah,
Right?
we tend to not say anything like negative or positive, because we just don't want
Yeah.
them to have the connotation for us. We make sure they're physically okay, right? Like,
That's
there's no
exactly it.
blood, there's no
100%.
blood, any of that stuff. But,
And
like,
if there is, bandage it and move on.
yeah, you handle it. Yeah.
Exactly. And being a single dad of 5 kids, man, there was injuries, there was this, there was broken that, and it just got to a point where this is life. This is
Yeah.
what life hands you. You deal with it. Oh, you got injured? Okay. Like you said,
Yeah, we
bleeding,
usually
let's
like give
fix
them a
it.
second. We give them a second
Yeah.
to figure it out. And if they've stopped crying or like, you know, they stopped doing what they're doing, and be like, okay, so tell me what happened. Well, I was sitting on the chair and then I fell off and I hit that. Oh, wow. Okay, I could see how that would hurt. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. You ready to keep going now? Okay, good. Let's go do something else. You know, it's
Sweet.
just
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So, Jeremy, you specialize in using podcasting and new media to create
mm,
trust and opinion leader status. Can you explain what this entails and why does it work?
because we have this really interesting world we're heading into with podcasting. Like I think initially, and you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. Like, what's the perfect length for a podcast? Like the newsflash is there is none, right? Like it's kind of takes whatever it takes. But early on, there was a lot of like I feel like online marketers in this space where it was like, okay, interviews have to be between 20 and 30 minutes because that's the average commute. Did you know that's the average commute? And you have to have the right direct response marketing like married into your podcast and stuff. So like people thought it was this real like extreme marketing vehicle. And here's the thing that's happened, right? Because we're looking at this since like 2012 and even before that. A lot of that stuff has started to disappear. And what we started to get is this really cool space where people have long form conversations. And you can't get that anywhere else, right? Because TV is like, you know, every show happens on the hour, on the half hour, and blah, 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 blah. And we have the sponsor messages and everything else. Sure, podcasts have sponsors and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's no rhyme or reason to how you have to do it. You know, like I know Joe Rogan had Jordan Peterson on not long ago, and it was like a 4 hour episode, which for me, that was a little bit much to confront. I couldn't really get through a 4 hour episode. But like at the same time, like it takes whatever it takes. And you can have a great conversation. You really get to know people in a very different way than you could before, like something that wasn't really open to us, where you get to learn to know them as a person. I think even in this episode here, like I've talked a lot more of my life than I've talked about another podcast, but this has given a really kind of unique place for us to get that from people. And so because of that, like number one, people are allowed to be vulnerable and show you who they really are. And number two, you know, when you're teaching on the subject, you know, like people can really learn something from you that they hopefully can apply. And I think when you can do that, you create that know, like, and trust factor, which is really important in PR. People know you, they like you, and trust you. So because of that, they're either willing to make the next step with you or tell somebody else to make the next step with you. So in really helping people to tell the right story and help them to appear on the right podcasts, like we're doing a lot with that. And I think that's what's really, really cool about, you know, kind of where we're at in the podcasting world right now.
Yeah, it is. I've only been, I'm 90, 94, 95 episodes in, and I'm just learning the ropes. And you've been doing it for a while, and many other people like Tony have been doing it for a while. And I hear all the evolution of people getting to, I read stuff quite a bit, and they're getting into
Yeah.
some, subscription this, subscription that, and like you said, well, how long should things be, and how long shouldn't it be? And I just got to keep on staying real to who I want to be. That this is a passion of mine to
100%.
bring people the messages out there. And as we talked about prior to recording, the numbers, right? The downloads and this and that. And I get caught up in that. And thank goodness I have people such as yourself that remind me, what is your purpose of doing this? What are you trying to accomplish and achieve? I'm not going to be a Joe Rogan. I'm not going to be, some of these people that, have tens of thousands, or my friend Patty that has 2.5 million listens an episode. I'm not, and tons of sponsorship. And I don't want to be that. I want to be me, my unique person, my unique version of who I have presented myself to be, as a person that gives a heck about other, have fantastic guests on like you, and just have conversations so people can resonate. And one thing I want to add, I found one of my first episodes, I think it was in the first 10 or 12, is still my most listened to episode. I go into my analytics, and every other week somebody's listening to that episode. Well, evergreen, right? People are looking.
Yep.
And if you do a good podcast, people might not discover this one right away, but 2 years later, I got a new fan, and they're listening to Jeremy and I have a great conversation about education, family, upbringing, podcasting, just everything, personal development. So I love podcasting for that ability, right? To be out there in the ether forever. One of the things I also talk about too, I don't know if you agree with this or not, it's a great way for creating your living legacy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's quite interesting from that perspective, because even like the things I'll hear from people to like, oh my, like I had an interview the other day, and I was on this guy's podcast, and he goes, Jeremy, I know you don't know me. Thank you for being on my podcast. I listened to your show 4 years ago. Then I hopped on one of your webinars 3 years ago. I didn't have the money to buy your program, but your webinar was really good and it taught me enough to get started. Started a podcast, it helped me start my business, and it's changed my life. And here we are now. Like, wow, like that's a living legacy, right? Because that person listened to a piece of content I did 4 years ago, did a training I did 3 years ago. It helped them to get just what they needed to get started. And like, full circle, I'm back on their podcast.
That's awesome. That's what I call the warm and fuzzy feeling, right? You get that warmth inside your heart because you gave, didn't expect back, and it still comes full circle. Like that's amazing. I love that
Yeah.
story. Thanks for sharing that. So, Jeremy, you help people learn how to hack their position as a trusted authority in their space. I found this very intriguing. So, how does one hack their position and outshine their competition?
Well, because a lot of people, Dwight, they're interested in like, the big numbers and the big podcast, the big media experience. And, you really win when you niche. You win the smaller you go. And that's what we're really teaching people to do is number one, if you've differentiated enough, which is something, David Breyer talks about a lot, like if you're not going to differentiate, then you're just going to promote other people that do what you do. So you need to differentiate and show you're different. That's one part of it. And if you're not going to do that, like don't start a podcast. But if you're gonna start one, definitely be different. And the other part about it is like go on some other shows that are people within your industry or within your niche that really, really matter. But niching down and going as small as you possibly can is how you actually make an impact. I think far too often people are they're a conversation I always have with clients when they get started, because I'll tell you what, there's the same 5 shows everybody wants to go on. And you could probably name them offhand. But I talk to them and be like, so is this vanity or is this impact? And when you look at, well, it's actually, it's a little bit of it. It's a lot of bit of vanity. Okay. So what does impact look like? So then we take a look at that, and it's really niching down so that the people that need to know you, like you, and trust you do so. So then you're talking to a smaller group of people, you're interviewing more niche celebrities. But to me, you can really change your positioning by being on the right podcast, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, it does. Listeners, you should rewind and listen to that again, right? Vanity versus impact. I like that because I've struggled, as you and I talked about. And when I've had people that are super uber successful podcasters tell me, you know what, just keep on keeping on. Like that lady I mentioned, Patty, she's been
Yeah.
podcasting for 14 years before it was even
Wow.
called podcasting. And now she's gone global. She's in the top 0.5% or whatever, but she's amazing. But she said, you know what? I had times where I didn't have somebody like me talking to you saying, hey, and I was going to quit. Right.
Yeah.
And I just kept on keeping on. Now look where I am. Look at my media empire. And so, yeah, it's just vanity versus impact. I just want to impact. Right.
Yeah.
If my Give a Heck brand, I believe it. Well, obviously I'm friends with David as well. And we've talked about my brand and differentiating, and I've been through his program and we communicate. He sends me information, and he's been on my podcast. He used I loved it when I interviewed him. He used my podcast. I don't know if you realize, a couple months back in May, I think it was, going into June, he was constantly using snippets from the podcast that I had with him on, and he was creating reels from it, just because we have such a genuine connection, right?
Yeah.
Just like you and I believe do too as well. So, but thank you for sharing that. I want to talk
Cool.
about your book,
Yeah. Sounds
from
good.
Unremarkable to Extraordinary: How to Ignite Your Passion to Go from Passive Observer to the Creator of Your Own Life. Tell me about the book, brother.
So I wanted to start this from day one, like, back in like 2014. And here's the thing I ran into, you're not ready. The time's not right, whatever it may be. And I happened to run into kind of the right book coach that was willing to like help me get that message out. And I'll be honest with you, like kind of having the right person to communicate with can be a big deal for help you figure out like what the message is. And once I kind of had some clarity on where I wanted to go with it, it's been more enriching for kind of even the direction the podcast has gone. because it's helped me to figure out like, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this? What's the impact I'm trying to make? And here's the really, really interesting thing. I wrote the entire book in the end of 2019 and then like January, February of 2020. Then things got a little crazy, right? We had businesses shut down. We had people having medical treatments forced upon them. The world got a little bit crazy. And privately, I've always been extremely opinionated. All my friends that know me well know, I'm going to have an opinion, but it's going to be concise and backed up by data, and it's going to be researched and everything else. I never did that in my podcast. I never did that in my writing. So you know what I did? I took some risks. I started interviewing some people that kind of got me in trouble, but it's okay. I had Peter McCullough on the show. I had Del Bigtree on the show. I had some political candidates and political names in the show because I wanted to find out about the things that I felt like were a big problem in my world. And because of that, I threw out the first version of this book that I wrote and throughout the entire thing and started all over again. And what ended up happening is the single most real thing I've ever put together. And it was based on like, what does success look like? What do your values look like? What does achieving an extraordinary life look like? And I took a lot of the stories and experiences and people I had spoken to and weaved it in there. But I feel like there's so many lies in the world of personal development. Like, just say it in the mirror 5 times every morning. And before you know it, like, wow. But here's the thing they forget. If you're not doing anything, it's not going to change. And so I wanted to show people like, what are the successful actions people are doing? Is it journaling? Is it learning how to lead? Is it working at something that maybe you're not passionate about now, but you will be after a while? And I wanted to show people how you create, your version of an extraordinary life.
That's awesome. I like how you talked about speak in the mirror 5 times. And I have a big problem with, I'm not saying it's not good, but I have a big issue with The Secret and how people have drank the Kool-Aid in regards to The Secret, how they can
forget the other half of it, the action that makes it work.
ABC, like Tony talks about, one of his best speeches I heard at any of the Arte events was when he talked about ABC. He was up on the stage and, action, belief, consistency. That's fine. I think there's a place for you to have positive self-talk and do stuff like that. But if you're not, you can't materialize the fact of money coming into your account or a car appearing in your driveway or a house coming out of the ground. You can believe in it. You can talk about it. You can, be positive, but you need to actually put in the work to get to it. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and here's an interesting thing about that too, because like, even like, like I do some of the sales for my company. I used to do all of it, and now I do a very small percentage. But one of the forms somebody fills out before they have a conversation with me is they tell me about their business, they tell me how their year was, they tell me about their, the different things they're trying to achieve. And one of the really interesting questions is, what's your business been like this year? And I find that a lot of people that just have that first part of just look in the mirror or just do this or just do that, and they miss the second part. You know how they tell me their year went? Terrible. Oh my gosh, I need more business, because they're missing the action, man. Like, the action is so important.
Oh, absolutely. It is important. So one last thing I want to discuss with you, and just as an added note, we have to have an episode 2 now because there's so many other great things I think that we can have a conversation.
Yeah, I apologize. About. I kind of met. I definitely
apologize.
Booked out an hour and a half, but I thought I had longer than I did.
Don't apologize. I'm just putting you on the spot right now. I want to have a second episode as soon as possible because I have so many great things. Like, this conversation has been amazing. You're even more spectacular and a special dude than I even realized. And I really appreciate you. So, Jeremy, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
I would say, and this goes back to something we talked about before, and the idea of following your passion versus finding your passion. I would say, don't follow your passion, find it, because when you work towards something, number one, you earned it and it matters. And I think that's a big thing. And number two, you're going to give a heck more about things you've had to work for and things you've had to really earn. So I think if you find your passion rather than follow it, it's going to be a game changer in your life.
Oh, absolutely. And that is a great closing message. I appreciate your time, brother. our time's up. And I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, if they want to grab the book, that's over at getextraordinarybook.com, or if they want to connect with me, I'm over at commandyourbrand.com.
Sweet. I'll make sure that goes into the show notes. Listeners, you can find that at giveaheck.com. Hit the podcast portal button. You'll go in and you'll see Jeremy's smiley face, and you can scroll down and find out all the information on how to connect and get his book, or reach out to him on both fronts and book a meeting with him. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Jeremy. I appreciate your time. Go on.
No, I was going to say, hey, thank you so much for having me, man.
Oh, it's been awesome, brother. Like, I look forward to our second podcast, again, putting you on the spot. So I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experience, brother, so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.